Good morning, Little Masters, and welcome back to today's Tolkien Times. I'm the Man of the West, also from the Prancing Pony podcast, and we're spending Third Age Thursdays this series in the poetry and songs from the Lord of the Rings. And just a quick word, I recognize that around 30% of you watching or listening to this are not in the U.S., so you're not celebrating the Thanksgiving holiday today. But no matter where you are, I'm extraordinarily thankful for you. For the Tolkien community as a whole, yes, but especially for each of you who watch or listen to this show, listen to the Prancing Pony podcast, listen to the Rings of Power wrap-up, bought Why We Love Middle-earth, or who back my shows on Patreon. Your support of the various Tolkien projects that I've been involved in for almost 9 years now means a great deal to me. Thank you very much. And for those who are celebrating today, I wish you a happy Thanksgiving, hopefully surrounded by your loved ones. Now, we spent last week beginning our look at the Song of Durin, who wasn't surrounded by his loved ones, as sung by Gimli in the depths of Moria while the company made their way through the old dwarven kingdom of Khazad-dûm. Today, we'll finish our time in the story of Durin. Now, we already looked at the structure of the poem, stanzas of 2 to 4 rhyming couplets each, as well as at the original draft, which had that rhyme scheme AABA, with internal rhyming in the third line, the quatrains, and how that echoed the dwarven songs in The Hobbit. This week, we're going to dive into some discussion of the stanzas themselves, leaning on a conversation that Sean and I had about this in episode 157 of the PPP, as well as on Skull and Hammond's commentary in the collected poems of J.R.R. Tolkien. Now, as a refresher, the first stanza read, "The world was young, the mountains green, no stain yet on the moon was seen, no words were laid on stream or stone, when Durin woke and walked alone." The world was young. How young was it? Well, let's go back to the creation of the dwarves from chapter 2 in the Silmarillion of Aule and Yavanna. Now, after making the dwarves and being confronted for exceeding his authority, Aule offered to destroy his creation. But Iluvatar showed him mercy and gave the dwarves being, or sentience, and independent existence. But he said to Aule, "I will not suffer this, that these should come before the firstborn of my design, nor that thy impatience should be rewarded. They shall sleep now in the darkness under stone, and shall not come forth until the firstborn have awakened upon earth." Now, we aren't told precisely when the dwarves finally awoke, but it has to have been after the elves awoke at Cuiviénen. But it would also have to have been before the Noldor came back to Middle-earth, because chapter 10 of the Sindar tells us that it came to pass during the second age of the captivity of Melkor that dwarves came over the blue mountains of Ered Luin into Beleriand. We also hear about the ancient dwellings of the Naugrim, including Gabilgathal, better known as Belagost, and Tumunazahar, Nogrod. Now, clearly, they'd been around long enough to build massive dwellings in the mountains, including Khazad-dûm itself by then. Now, at first, there seems to be a problem with that chronology. The line, "No stain yet on the moon was seen." If this was before the Noldor came back to Middle-earth, there was no moon yet. Remember, the first rising of the moon occurred when Fingolfin and his host set foot back on Middle-earth at the end of chapter 9 of the Flight of the Noldor. When Sean and I talked about this, we surmised that perhaps Tolkien was already starting to rethink the origin of the sun and moon to make them coeval with Earth, as in some of the material in Myths Transformed. But that can't be it either, because if it was, then the assault on the moon by Melkor, which it seems this stain would be referring to, was way before the elves or dwarves awoke. But Skull and Hammond actually argue, and I think this makes the most sense, that the line about no stain yet on the moon was seen is just a poetic way of saying the moon had not yet been created, and that fits perfectly. Alternatively, it's perhaps a poetic flourish, not necessarily accurate historical fact. The point is the symbolism. No stain yet on the moon symbolizes the purity of Arda, at least the way the dwarves see it. When Durin woke and walked alone. The Silmarillion tells us that Aule took the 7 fathers of the dwarves and laid them to rest in far sundered places. But it's more than just not waking up with his 6 buddies. In the peoples of Middle-earth, we learned that the other 6 fathers of the dwarves all woke with their wives by their side. But Durin truly woke alone, the only one to do so. Now, before I go on, don't worry, I'm not going to spend, 4 minutes on every stanza. This isn't going to be a half-hour episode. So let's move on. The second stanza about naming the nameless hills and dells, drinking from untasted wells, especially in conjunction with the line, "No words were laid on stream or stone" from the first stanza, gives an especially Adam-like quality to Durin. Scull and Hammond argue that from the beginning, Tolkien depicted Durin as a kind of Adam who named the hills, streams, and other aspects of the land. In the drafts, Durin gave gold and silver their names in the secret language of the dwarves, and he was the first to wake the fire of gold, that is, to shape gold in a forge. Now, in the third stanza, we get a bit of a history lesson of the elves, speaking about the mighty kings in Nargothrond and Gondolin who've passed beyond the western seas. These, of course, would be Finrod and his successor in Nargothrond, Orodreth. Then in Gondolin, Turgon. Also, the bit about the world being fair in Durin's day, it's clearly referring to the time in which Durin lived, not to the very specific day when the last moon of autumn and the sun are in the sky together. Moving on to the fourth stanza, it describes the image of Durin on his throne, and I notice a great deal of light in this stanza. Light of sun and star and moon and shining lamps. Undimmed, shone forever fair and bright. Even the description of the golden roof and the silver floor tells you that light is just reflecting off surfaces, filling the halls with this radiance. It's not darksome at all, as Gimli tells us. The fifth stanza is a simple description of all the work that was done there. What we see here is the pride that dwarves take in their crafting, but it's a rather utilitarian passage. It isn't focused on the beauty of the items or even the quality of the items crafted. It's about the work and the accomplishment, the tools they use, and the store of weapons and jewels they gain from it. But we do get some beauty again in the sixth stanza. These aren't just blacksmiths, they're wordsmiths, singing and playing music. This is pure beauty, almost elvish, until that last line, at the gate the trumpets rang. Part of me reads that as a possible hint of tragedy. I mean, who blows trumpets at gates? Guards? Heralds? Is this a war horn blowing? I don't know. In the seventh stanza, we see that a lot of time has passed, right? The world, which was once described as young, is now gray. The mountains, which were once green, are just now old. The light of sun and star and moon that once shone undimmed, forever fair and bright, they're now replaced by darkness and shadow. We also get a hint, the tomb, plus in the last stanza, the wakes again from sleep, about the fact that the dwarves believe that Durin, who lived so long he became known as Durin the Deathless, right before he died, would return to them 6 more times, in fact. As Gimli says this, they've had 5 more Durins, but the most recent one died in Third Age 1980, slain by the Balrog that the dwarves awoke, and that's over 1,100 years ago. But they believe one will still come again. Spoilers, there will be. Durin the 7th and last, who is descended from Dain Ironfoot, rules over restored Moria in the 4th Age. Not that we get to see it, but still. Then we get the last few lines. They're important, not just historically, but also symbolically. Still the sunken stars appear. What are we reminded of every time we see stars in Tolkien? Hope. Hope that Durin will awaken again. Hope that the realm of Khazad-dûm will rise again. And we see that hope in Gimli's comments immediately before he sings this song. He still doesn't see this place as a darksome hole, even if in fact that's kind of what it is. He sees what it was and what it could be again. This poem is about glory, fall, rebirth. And when we looked at this back in season 4, it reminded both Sean and me of the song from chapter 10 of The Hobbit about the Mountain King's return. And folks, thank you for joining me for this week's Third Age Thursday. Stick around for more poetry tomorrow as I continue First Age Fridays and our read through the Lay of Leithian. And in my ongoing effort to make sure nobody is disappointed by my brief disappearance, I'm going to remind you again about the upcoming TTT schedule. This is the last week of the current 8-week series. The show is going to go into its usual hiatus for 2 weeks so that I can work on writing and preparing the next series. Then on December 16th, I'll come back and begin a full week of special holiday episodes on Letters from Father Christmas. After that, I'll take my actual time off for the weeks of Christmas and New Year's, starting Series 9 on January 6th. Check out patreon.com/Tolkien Times to learn how you can support the show, get an ad-free feed, join my content council, get a bonus weekly episode, and more. And if you're watching us on YouTube, you know the drill by now. Please like and subscribe. Follow or subscribe in your podcast apps and look for opportunities to give the show reviews wherever you can. And follow @Tolkien Times on your social media. And finally, as Faramir says, go with the goodwill of all good men.